My name is Amanda, and I'm here with
Andre.
And we are going to be doing some really cool readers advisory today as part of National Library Week. If you're not aware, it is Tuesday, April 6, 2021, and we are right in the beginning of National Library Week. So we are going to be celebrating all week with some really cool virtual events and things going on our social media platforms. I recommend you check that out. And today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be hearing from different staff members about some of the books in different age genres, kids, teens, which we're doing right now, and adults that changed their life. So we'd like to recommend these books from our staff to you. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off, and let's go ahead and get into these recommendations.
All right, so once again, I'm Andre. I'm going to be giving you guys some readers advisory about some teenage books that might be suitable. The first of which is The Giver. Written by Lois Lowry. It was published back in 1993. I read it the first time back in 8th grade, which, thinking of that now, is probably like 2005, 2006. Not sure if they teach it in schools anymore, but they did back then, and it was a pretty good introduction to like dystopian sci-fi. For those who don't know, it focuses kind of on a utopia that slowly reveals itself to be a dystopian society that's kind of taken away the wisdom of history and memory. Setting aside, it focuses on this kid named Jonas. He's turning 12 years old, and he's about to partake in a community-wide ritual known as the Ceremony of 12, where everybody in their society gets assigned a role. The ceremony happens, he doesn't get assigned a role, but then later finds out that he's been tasked with becoming the receiver of memory. Basically, the receiver of memory is this person that holds on to every memory and every bit of wisdom that society has gone through up until this point, but then just kind of hoards it into themselves and doesn't allow the rest of the community to actually partake in that. He's kind of like the person that helps guide everybody else through the weird stuff that might happen as a society develops. Because of this, Jonas kind of has like some weird internal conflicts on whether or not he should be sharing this information with people, and he kind of has to make the decision of whether or not he should share this with them or keep holding it in. Things that might better the community at large or kind of tear it apart. That said, have you guys read any kind of dystopian novels before? If so, name a few in the chat if you have.
Hey, and I'll go ahead and launch the poll if people want to answer for us if they've read any dystopian novels. Oh, it looks like we are getting some responses here. So if you have, name some of the ones you've liked or maybe disliked and the ones you would advise to avoid in the question section. You can leave your comments there in the question section. Let's go ahead and close the poll and see everybody's results. So it looks like, yes, all of our attendees have read a dystopian novel or a dystopian series before. So I look forward to seeing, sharing some of the ones you may recommend with us in the question section.
All right. Yeah, and that's pretty good. They were pretty popular a couple years ago. If you're familiar with them, you might be aware of The Hunger Games, Maze Runner, Divergent. For a little more mature audiences, you might be aware of like Battle Royale. That kind of edges the limit of what is appropriate for teenagers, but yeah, understandable. Yeah, those are all really good recommendations if you've read them before or if you're just trying to get into the actual genre. All perfect for that. Same thing with The Giver. It's a little more dated, but it still holds its own. It's not part of a long form story series, but it is part of like a quartet of novels that all kind of loosely interweave with each other, kind of like something more like Divergent, I guess. That series of books is actually called the Giver Quartet. The other books are Gathering Blue, Messenger, and Sun. So if you start out with the Giver, there's some room to grow. Beyond that, there's a few other adult fic novels that might pair well with the Giver. There's Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and Kurt Vonnegut's Player Piano. Both deal with societies where people are kind of put into like a machine and kind of get assigned roles to live through the rest of their lives, and kind of the dystopian sensibilities that come with that.
And that's
Likewise, there is
kind of
a
based on
little bit of
oh,
yeah.
what you're saying too. I really like that bit of advice that some of these are because they're teen novels or YA young adult novels. Teens can read them and kind of grow into different literature, or adults can read them and enjoy. You know what I mean? But if so, I like that. If you like this and you want to move on to some of the more adult novels, here's some further reading. So very cool.
Yeah. Um, on that same note, despite this novel being, I think it's in juvenile in our collection, it does deal with some serious topics. It doesn't dwell on them for too long, but it does like kind of go over some trigger warning kind of stuff, eugenics, infanticide, suicide. So if those are a little worrisome for you, maybe avoid the novel, but otherwise it's a pretty good read. But yeah, um, that, I'd say that wraps up The Giver. How about you, Amanda?
Sounds good. Sounds good. Let's hear about your next book selection.
All right, so the next book that we have here is The Wise and the Wicked. It's by Rebecca Podos. It was actually published about 2 years ago, 2019. I first read it last year when we were all on quarantine. I put the book up on display, and one of our coworkers had actually read it because of the book cover. She thought it looked pretty interesting, read through it, gave it back to me, thought I should read it because she thought I'd enjoy it, and yeah, it was a pretty good read. Um, it is a part of the magical realism genre, so do you guys know what magical realism is? If you can put up that poll.
So we are a little more split on this one. Let's show the results.
Okay, that's understandable. Magical realism, just kind of like a very brief description of it, is kind of the blending of like a slice of life novel, but with like magical components. So like fantasy components where like someone might be able to use magic, but they also have like a regular life. So uh, there might also be like elements of fantasy, something like The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, where like there's a curse that's plaguing a family, but the majority of the novel is about a family kind of immigrating, which is also similar to this one. The story kind of focuses on this girl named Ruby. She's 16 years old. She's about to turn 17, and as she's coming of age, she's kind of learning more about her family and the kind of troubled history they've had. Her family itself is kind of a coven of witches that have escaped from Russia that have come to the U.S. to escape basically this group of men that have been plaguing their forest for maybe about the last generation or so. Coming to the US, her coming of age, she kind of comes to terms with the revelations that maybe the stories of her past or her family have been telling her aren't exactly the most reliable things. And, you know, there's a feud that is slowly dwelling with another family within their town that she doesn't really know. Um, it's kind of a slow start. It kind of starts out as like a funereal dirge as someone in their family dies, and then it kind of goes from there and becomes like a vendetta story. So, um, a lot of the theming regarding the story focuses on the legacy that families put onto people. So, you know, her living with this coven of witches, uh, the legacy that they're instilling into her, whether or not that legacy is like fictional or not, whether or not it's part of a larger scheme of fairy tales, or if it's actually based in truth, and kind of like a weird confrontation or tension with her trying to be an individual at the same time. Laden into those themes are also very LGBTQI friendly characters. A lot of them are kind of at that same point where they're kind of feeling a tension between who they are as an individual versus who they are as a family member. And yeah, it does a lot to kind of convey that in the story. It's very, very well written. Um, The ending's really good. Leaves a lot to the imagination. Once you get started after that very slow beginning, it kind of goes on a roll. Good intros to the genre besides this book and The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. You guys might have heard of The Life of Pi by Jan Martel or Beloved by Toni Morrison. Both of those are kind of wildly different versions of what magical realism is, but they are within that same genre. Kind of very grounded stories, but very fantastical in their tellings, I guess. Good follow-ups for this include, I have a few graphic novels here. There's The Magic Fish by Li Nguyen Trung. Try not to follow or stumble over the syllables. It's kind of a graphic novel following the coming out of this kid who goes to Catholic school and kind of finds relief by reading, I guess, fairy tales with him and his mother and kind of relaying the stories between each other and how they can use those stories to kind of relate to one another. Likewise, there's Lost at Sea by Brian Lee O'Malley. It's kind of about a girl that's just trying to find herself post high school. As for actual fiction, like just plain novels, there's The Seep by Chana Porter, which is kind of a weird, fantastical sci-fi novel. It's very much set within a grounded reality, but it kind of goes and blends with some sci-fi that you might not see as hard sci-fi, I guess would be the case. It's more like fantastical, weird kind of magic stuff. But yeah, it deals a lot with grief, which is also something that this novel deals with a lot. But yeah, that's The Wise and the Wicked.
Very cool. I like that you've picked kind of a classic YA novel, but also a newer one that people can just, so people can discover that if they have not read that one yet, but also a newer author that they might not be familiar with yet. And I think that, I think that's very interesting. It's something funny people always say as well. You don't want to judge a book by its cover. Obviously, you don't want to judge it by its cover, but sometimes it really is the cover that draws you in. I can't tell you how many times just a beautiful, interesting, well-designed cover has really just attracted me to a book, and I thought, oh, I want to see what's inside this. So I think this is a very beautiful. I like the colors. I like it. It kind of has that folkloric art look to it. I think it's very, very interesting, very appealing. So let's go ahead, Andre, and you are going to give us some suggestions if people want to find more great reads.
Yeah, so resource shout out. Our resource, NoveList Plus, if you didn't know beforehand, it's a third-party service that allows us to look up read-alikes, similar authors, just basically any kind of book that might be somewhat related one way or another to a current book that you're reading. Yeah, it's a really handy resource if you just want to continue reading a series or read something that reads similar to a series that you have read previously and find something new based off of that. If you want to locate it on our website, you would just have to go to hcplc.org, navigate to books and more, and then navigate to new and recommended, and it should be somewhere near the bottom of that page. Likewise, we have a program later this week. The next book should be on Thursday, April 8th at 6:30 p.m., and you should be able to register for that as well.
Okay, those are great resources. I'm going to go ahead and come back on. And I do, if people have any questions about any of the books if you want to ask Andre more about some of the books he's reading or the books he's shared, if you want to share with us some of your great reads, we always love to hear. So we're going to leave the questions section open there for a little bit. And I am going to remind you, so thank you for the shout out. You can go to hcplc.org/events to find the book or to find the program, the virtual program, How to Use NoveList. That is called The Next Book. It will be this Thursday at 6:30 p.m. NoveList, if you haven't been using it, it is a great resource because it helps you find books like the ones you enjoy reading. You can read-alikes, find similar authors, similar tone, genre, stories, you know, because sometimes the best and worst feeling in the world, it's so bittersweet, finishing a series you love because you've come to the end of this journey with a great series, but then it's over and you don't get to go on that adventure with them anymore. So if you have ever found yourself in that dilemma, definitely check out NoveList because it can help you find books based on the books you already like and the books you've already read. I do want to give another shout out for our National Library Week activities. We are going to be having our first ever virtual library trivia night on Friday, April 9th at 6:30 p.m. You can play solo or you can play as a team. It's going to be a lot of fun. There will be prizes involved. So you can find both of those events and register on our events calendar at hcplc.org/events. This National Library Week, we love to share with you what we love about the library, but we love to hear from you and your library story. So if you would like to submit your library story with us, please go to hcplc.org/about/stories. You can share there with us what the library means to you, a special memory, you know, anything that, any part of your library story, we would love to hear. And then if you do have any questions for us, if you'd like to contact us, you can always give us a call. If you have questions about getting your library card, using your library card, finding some of those resources we talked about, like NoveList, or going online to find our digital books through the catalog, give us a call at 813-273-3652, or you can connect with us online at hcplc.org/contact. Okay. So we're not hearing any, we don't have any book recommendations. That's okay. But Andre, I do want to ask a question, which we actually got in our previous Books That Changed My Life program, which is, and they were asking specifically about teens, is how do you get teens excited about or interested in reading? And what advice would you give for teens to get them interested in reading?
Okay. I wouldn't say there's kind of like a hard and fast way to do this, but the way that got me into reading as a teenager was just find stuff that you might be somewhat interested in, some kind of subjects. I know in my early teens I read a lot of Michael Crichton just because I was really into speculative fiction. So Jurassic Park, Lost World, Timeline, just weird stuff like that. It kind of goes all over the place. From there, it kind of led me to like more pulpy stuff. So like Kurt Vonnegut, Aldous Huxley, which are more kind of grounded in sci-fi. Um, but yeah, just start with something that you're mildly interested in and see if you can find a story that resonates with you. Because once that happens, you'll want to keep reading it, and then you'll probably want to pick up something else by that same author or something that reads like it, and then just go from there.
I think that is great advice. You know what I've always said, Andre, is that, you know, your books are like your diet. Some books are like broccoli and some books are like cotton candy. Now, you couldn't survive on broccoli alone, and you shouldn't or you wouldn't survive on cotton candy alone, but not every book has to be, you know, the book that changed your life. Some can be just fun and passing, and some can be those ones that really nourish your mind and nourish your soul. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And this is interesting advice from a librarian, but if it doesn't work for you, just walk away. You know, you can always pick it up later. But my philosophy is too many books, too little time. So if you're reading a book and you're kind of unless you have to read it for class, but if you're reading a book on your own for leisure, for fun, and you're really just not enjoying it, put it down and find something you do enjoy, because there's no point in making yourself read something you don't really like. And I think a lot of people do that. Oh, I should read this book. You know, there's so many books out there that there is a great wealth of books for you to find something that pertains to you. Okay, so that is good advice. And then we do have a question about the second book, the Rebecca Podos book. You mentioned that one, it has kind of like a mix of genres. It's like a revenge story, and it's got a magical realism, but it's set, people want to know, is that set in modern times? And does it have any Russian folklore in it, like the Baba Yaga, kind of like those stories, those characters, or is it
Yeah,
set?
so it's set in, I guess, what would be current day Maine.
Oh,
It doesn't really specify like an actual like time reference, but it's assumed at least within maybe the last decade or so, especially with it being published in 2019.
right.
Um, it does incorporate some Russian folklore, specifically Baba Yaga, and like maybe some like lesser known Russian folklore. But yeah, it kind of intermingles all of that and kind of presents it as like a teenaged face story with it all, I guess would be the best way to put it.
No, I think that, and sometimes you find that, I think that's a nice thing too about YA. There is a lot of, there's a lot of mixing of genres sometimes, and I think
Mhm.
that's very cool because that's kind of when you're finding yourself as a person and as a reader. So it's exposing you to different things. It's exposing you to magical realism. And if you like these type of books, you can kind of go off in this, type of literature. It's exposing you to, this kind of folklore. Oh, you might want to read more about Russia or this or that.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's interesting that you see a little bit more in YA than you do in just strictly adult literature, which, I mean, it's not to say that you don't ever see that, but it's something that's kind of nice that's there. And I think something you hit on with a lot of the books you were talking about, a lot of them are coming of age stories where people are finding themselves or finding their identity, because at that time, that's what a lot of people are doing. When you're a teenager, you're experimenting with different things, different styles, different interests, to kind of see, what you like and what you don't like. And I think that's why sometimes those books connect so much to the audience, because it really is, you understand the experience, which I think is very, very okay.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like that is the end of our questions. So that is the end of our program. I want to thank everyone so much for attending. I hope we will see you at a future virtual program. And I want to thank Andre so much thank you for sharing your books with us and your book recommendations. So everyone, have a very good evening and a wonderful National Library Week. Bye.